I'm Anna Runkle, also known as the Crappy Childhood Fairy, and today I'm going to talk about what I call the underdog effect. So this is kind of the sort of air around a person who had a crappy childhood that it kind of reminds me of like the cloud around Pigpen, if you remember the character Pigpen from the Charlie Brown cartoons. And there's like that dirty cloud around him all the time, and it's just got little specks of dust and maybe a bug or something in it. And this is not a literal cloud around us, but it's a combination of stigma that comes from the outside and just bad self-esteem that comes from the inside that follows us around if we have not worked out the crappy childhood crap. So what do I mean by that? There are three parts of it. One is bad habits. One of them is bad judgment. And the third one is distorted perception that makes it hard for us to see our part in problems. The underdog effect it's a reflection of bad stuff that happened, in our circumstances at one time that now gets inside and it's part of our behavior or part of our character. And so, as with all the disadvantages that we can get from growing up with a crappy childhood, like brain changes, just like not really getting the memo on how you're supposed to act or deal with jobs, not maybe having role models on how to do this. Maybe the childhood PTSD has affected our ability to pay attention in school, and there's a learning deficit or a lack of education. So there's all these like external things that can happen, but these ones that we take inside are the ones that we can actually change. So when we can identify what part of the crappy childhood experience sort of got in, this is great because we cannot change what happened in the past, but we can change what's gotten inside of us. So I break it down into bad habits, bad judgment, and distorted perception. Let's take the example of being late for work. Being late for work is a bad habit. What's going on there? I'm having bad judgment. Maybe as a result of having a high-stress childhood. If you remember last week, we talked about this study out of the University of Wisconsin that showed that people who had a high-stress childhood, which is basically a crappy childhood, have trouble predicting, have trouble judging whether an action they're about to take is going to have big consequences or little consequences. So that's bad judgment. And then the distorted perception. Let's say, I tell you, I do this, and I think it's pretty common, is that it's hard after a crappy childhood to be very clear about like what part of the problem did I cause and what part of the problem was beyond my control. So for example, when people are late, they will very often say it's because of traffic. Okay, I don't know about where you live. Where I live, the traffic, it is somewhat unpredictable. But what is predictable is that it's unpredictable. And you always know it could take, if something is normally 10 minutes away, it could take 20. And so the smart thing to do is to leave 20 minutes before you have to be there. So these things start going into a cycle. So I'm late for work, it becomes a habit. I start having bad judgment about how much worse it's going to be if I continue to be late, that I might lose my job. I start having distorted perception about whose fault is it. I don't see it's my fault. Then I do lose my job and I overreact. And then the cycle repeats. I lose my temper with people at work. Bad judgment, distorted perception. I didn't lose my temper on purpose. It's just kind of happening to me. That's what I mean by the underdog effect. Is we start out at a disadvantage and we start to go into a cycle that starts making the problem worse and starts making that problem part of our reality, part of who we are. So how do we back up out of that identity and that reality? First, you got to take stock and ask yourself, thinking honestly, do I have a bad habit? Is there something I'm doing that is chronically causing stress and worry and setting me back in life? And then to honestly ask yourself, am I using bad judgment? Am I having trouble detecting that trouble will follow? Let's say it's casual sex with somebody, bad judgment of determining like what's going to happen if you sleep with somebody you don't actually know, or what's going to happen if you have unprotected sex with somebody. The consequences can be enormous, and then it can be hard to see our part. And I've seen this over and over again is, so casual sex has occurred, things turn out disastrously, and there's a lot that can go wrong there in terms of like sexually transmitted infections, unintended pregnancy, heartache and disappointment. So let's say a casual sex thing occurs. The other party never calls again, and we're just like incredibly upset. Like, how could this have happened? And we cannot see our part. And we'll say, what a jerk. He said he would call. Well, so the question of distorted perception is it realistic in a situation like casual sex that you would absolutely know what the character is of this other person and whether they're sincere in what they're saying they're going to do? In that example, no, you don't. Let's say it's about overeating, right? So do I have a bad habit? Yeah, I tend to overeat. Do I have bad judgment? Yes, I think that I can go to a restaurant that has really huge portions and just eat a little bit. Do I have distorted thinking? Yeah, I start to blame the restaurant. Why do they have this food? Why are they putting this in front of me? It's my friends. They eat this. It's not really fair. I have a bad metabolism. So, we go into the underdog effect, and it's this like negative cycle of thinking where our behavior is not working for us, and we cannot see that the trouble begins when we make a bad judgment, and we cannot see that only we can change the judgment. We have to change the decisions we're making about that. Now, believe me, I know how hard it can be to change the decisions, and literally it can be beyond us to do in the moment. But there are steps we can take to start to change the pattern. So I recommend first you take one problem at a time, and you can either choose the most important problem that's causing the most pain in your life, or you can take one that's a little easier but has a solution in store. It really helps just your motivation if you can actually solve a problem. So you might want to pick a problem where there's a solution that you could solve within today, or within a couple of days, just so you have the pleasure of solving a problem. And when that's done, then move on to the second one. So let's say my problem is being late to work. So the second thing is I want to make a red line against it. All right, so this week I'm going to be on time for work. Even if I have to miss my shower or skip my coffee, I'm going to be on time to work. I'm going to do whatever it takes. 3, I'm going to take full responsibility for changing it. I'm not going to make this contingent on what anybody else does. And if there are other people involved in my morning, I'm going to account for that and take full responsibility that the only person who can get me to work on time is me. The 4th thing is to quiet the hamster wheel about it. That makes it so hard to think clearly about stuff. Now, this video, I'm going to keep mentioning it throughout the Crappy Childhood Fairy blog and in all these videos. But you want to take a personal inventory about it. You want to write down the fears and resentments that are active for you in this, and then seek to be free of them. Meditate. Meditation is such a good way to quiet your mind and become aware. Since we know for a fact that those of us who had a high-stress childhood have trouble detecting when trouble is there, it's so important to keep improving our brain function, and meditation is one of the best ways there is. It can be very simple. I teach a method on the video that I mentioned before where you can sit down. 20 minutes is great. If you can just do 5 minutes, that's good too. And you say to yourself a very simple word, a mantra. You can use the word this, you can use the word release, or you can create a word, any word you want, but it's good if it doesn't have too much meaning, to just rest your mind, have no goal other than rest your mind. And a rested mind is a lot better at being sensitive to problems, risks, and noticing solutions. Number 6 is get help from others. We're not good at figuring this stuff out by ourselves. We are meant to do this together with other people. We know that our judgment gets a little squirrely as a result of having had a crappy childhood. But even if we had a crappy childhood, we're pretty good at listening to other people's situations and offering good suggestions. Because when we're not triggered by stuff, which we're not by other people's problems, we do have good judgment and we can help each other. Number 7 is stop being dishonest about it. When I made the change in my life where I didn't make excuses, it was really hard. I remember the first time I was honest about why I was late, and the reason was I had overslept. And I wanted to say it was because there was something out of my control, but oversleeping is under my control. And so it was like a consulting job, and I really kind of messed people up. I was a whole hour late. And I came in and I said, I'm really sorry I'm late. And I didn't say why, actually. And you don't have to. You don't have to. In fact, it's a service to other people to, when you are late, to be as not undisruptive as possible. Just say, I'm sorry, and get to work. And if people do need to know why, tell the truth. And I'll tell you why you should tell the truth. Is because until you start to experience the direct consequences of what's happening, you're going to keep having distorted thinking. There's this little part of us when we fib and say, oh, it's because of the traffic. We believe it was the traffic. We already know that as people with a crappy childhood, we have trouble learning from our mistakes. So in order to learn from our mistakes, it's so important to just drop down into being honest. You can say nothing, or if you must say something, say the truth. But just see if you're willing to make a policy of just total honesty right now. Now, never be honest just when it's going to hurt people. It's so much better to say nothing. But just don't lie. This is all about, we're trying to get our brain back online. And part of a crappy childhood is often that adults lied to us. And we've developed a very good capacity to kind of fit ourselves to the lie. And a lot of recovering from a bad childhood is to not fit ourselves to the lie, to go ahead and experience the discomfort of the truth. And you'd be surprised, the consequences are not so bad. And it's actually a way when we can admit humbly that what the real reason is that we've let people down, people have more respect for us. I mean, when's the last time when somebody said that traffic made them late that you actually believed them anyway? And even when we believe them, just hearing about traffic stresses us out. So a simple policy of just being honest and humble, saying nothing if we can, explaining honestly if we must, what it is that's gotten in the way of our fulfilling our responsibilities. Number 8 is apologize to those who we've affected and let them know we're working on it. Just again, be humble, be straightforward, and it will build more respect with people. Number 9 is just now enjoy how good it feels to be acting with integrity and to be honestly working on the bad habits that are holding us down in the underdog effect. Growing up with a crappy childhood, there can be so many little issues piling up that you can't even remember what they are. It's just like layer upon layer of stuff where you had a bad habit, you started getting distorted thinking, till you don't even know what the source of these problems are, and it's overwhelming. Like, it's terrible to think that you don't have control over these problems. So one at a time, there's a way to start tackling this stuff. And pretty soon, we're going to release a course on how to start unpacking the damage caused by a crappy childhood. So if you're interested in that course or you want to see the upcoming videos between now and then, make sure you follow the blog so that you can get an email every time a new video or posting comes out. Thanks.